We have somehow made it to the final weekend of the regular season in college football. It was just Labor Day. Now we're talking about championship weekend. So many things to get to here on the Matt Barrie Show, presented by Allstate. The holiday weekend is always entertaining because there's always so many games to get to. We'll check in on Georgia and how they skated by Georgia Tech. We'll get into Alabama and the Iron Bowl and all the upsets that have happened as we now get closer to the penultimate rankings of the college football season. It is time now to check in with Paul Finebaum, presented by Allstate. And Paul, I mean, have you ever seen anything like it, what we've seen the last 14 weeks in college football?
No, man, I thought you were going to say the last 2 days, Matt. I mean, if you just think about where Georgia was at one point, Southern Cal tying Notre Dame, Miami, Syracuse, that did happen, Clemson, which did happen. We almost had even more. And it is stupefying. I was trying to figure out the playoffs right now. I'm completely lost. I mean, I'm hearing people value wins over Duke and Wake Forest as big wins now. I mean, this is what we have with the 12-team playoff.
Yeah, and you know what? For the crowd, there's always that crowd. You know, I was one of those like, well, expansion. I like the four teams. What is it going to do the regular season? Well, we can check it off the list. It's made the regular season better than we ever thought possible in college football. Now, can you sit here and tell me, though, that there are 12 teams that belong playing for a national championship? Because this is, I mean, there's one undefeated team that's working. The rest of them have losses and blemishes. So you can either say, well, this is the perfect year for the 12-team college football playoff, or I told you so. There aren't 12 teams that should be playing for a national championship.
No, there really aren't. But to me, the biggest surprise is we worried about conference championship games. Would they matter anymore? And we're sitting around in shock at some of these games that are coming up and the possibility. So yeah, they do matter. The SEC game doesn't, hold significance like it has in the past, like last year. But look
Mm-hmm.
at the ACC, the Big 12. I mean, I mean, Clemson has the worst loss of the season, and they're 1 week away from being in the playoffs. It's
Yeah,
truly
I mean,
unbelievable.
it really is. We'll unpack a lot of this stuff because there are things that you look at and you're like, how did this happen? Here's the one I want to start with, though, because we talk about this a lot. We have relationships with coaches. We talk to a lot of people around the coaching circle, and the one that, to me, of all the things I've seen this year, to me, the most stunning and inexcusable outcome of the season happened in the noon window in Columbus against Ohio State and Michigan, where the Buckeyes were 3 touchdown favorites against a Michigan team that lost everyone in the NFL. They have no quarterback to speak of. They have a rookie head coach that didn't have any experience. I mean, for Ryan Day to lose that one, to me, was the most stunning outcome of any game I've seen so far this season.
Yeah, because it was probably the game we talked about going into the season, and we're almost joking, Matt, saying, yeah, there's a path for Ryan Day to get fired, to lose to Michigan, and then not win the national championship. And here we are, and you almost are. It reminds me a little bit of a couple of years ago when you wanted to write Ohio State off, but you can't. And I mean, I don't really know how to characterize that. I mean, it's one thing to take a game lightly. Remember a couple of years ago, Georgia had a path. Georgia was already in the playoffs. They lost to Alabama. They in the SEC game, and they came back and beat them 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later in the national championship. This is different.
Yeah.
Uh, this is the biggest game of the year in college football, and they still can't figure out how to win it. And this is a whole other special show we'll do on planting the flag, but Ryan Day comes up with just this idiotic statement about, well, we're not going to let them do that to our field. Try to beat them first, okay, Ryan? You won't have to worry about that.
Yeah, that was the back and forth after that game. And I sit next to Joey Galloway, and he's been a good friend of mine for years. And he's sitting there, he's almost laughing at the absurdity of everything going on because you bring in Will Howard because you think he's going to be your answer at quarterback. Well, the guy you chased out, Kyle McCord, pulls off the upset against Miami, throws for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns. And you watched that game yesterday, and it's like, how did Ohio State get to the point where they have the most talented roster in college football, and we're arguing about letting teams plant the flag at midfield when you had 4 quarters to ram the flag right up there you wanted it to?
I mean, and again, it happened all day long and all night because these guys watch other games. But that's the one that gets me. If you're Ryan Day, keep your mouth shut. Uh, I, I mean, his path is so interesting. He's got let's remind the audience, he's got a brand new athletic director. This is the same guy who fired Jimbo Fisher 2
Yeah.
years ago in Ross Bjork. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think you can evaluate Ryan Day until it's all over this year, whenever they walk off the field for the final time. But they better not lose in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, here's an interesting dynamic, Paul, and we really haven't gotten into this too much, but I think Ryan Day is probably going to be the ultimate test case. How many jobs will a college football playoff ultimately save in its 12-team inception and moving forward? Because you can't sit here and be like, Ryan Day, you're out, Chip Kelly, you're
You
in.
can't.
One, because Chip Kelly wants nothing to do with being a head coach. Two, Ohio State's going to make the playoff. You know what that means? They have a chance to play for the national championship, and at any given point, they're the most talented team in the country.
Yeah, 3 years ago, I think it was 3 years ago, they lost to Michigan and came right back in the semifinals and had a two-touchdown lead over Georgia in the fourth
Yep.
quarter. They would have won. I think that was the TCU year. That was 2 years. They would have won the national championship. So you can't, the old columnist in me wants to just write the column, fire the coach. You can't do it.
You're right.
You cannot do anything, but you have to watch it, and then you have to decide where you're going to go. And if he wins, I mean, it would. By the way, it's, I can believe they'll win the. I mean, they may win the national championship. Just because they took off the biggest day of the year in college football doesn't mean they can't come back.
They very well could because, like I said to start the show, there's so much parity in college football, which gets me to this next point. You alluded to Clemson a moment ago. I would like to take that path with Clemson and Georgia, two teams that had blemishes on their schedule. They somehow make the conference championship game. Georgia was down double digits, 27-13 late in the fourth quarter against Brent Key, Haynes King, and Georgia Tech. South Carolina and Clemson are going back and forth. South Carolina comes back and beats Clemson in that game in a non-conference game, both non-conferences, both ACC, SEC matchups. But now both Georgia and Clemson are playing in the conference championship game with a chance to go to the college football playoff, which seems hilarious to me because these are two teams we were picking apart the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, it's remarkable, and yeah, it goes across the board, Matt. Yeah, how does Clemson lose? But I think it's the nature of this game. I mean, I was in Tuscaloosa over the weekend and I watched Alabama, look chaotic, but
Yeah.
still win by two touchdowns in their biggest rivalry game. That was a week after they couldn't do anything. I think there's so many elements to it. I had a head coach tell me this week, as you see them every week, you don't understand. It's free agency now, and these
Yeah.
guys they're not dialed in like the normal player. They literally don't listen to anything we say, and I think you're seeing that in living HD every Saturday.
Yeah. So where do you put? So look, I believe if you're minus a 3-loss team, like I don't think because Clemson's in the conference championship game, they're automatically in the college football playoff. I think they're going to steal a bid if they beat SMU, and then the committee's got all hell breaking loose. But I believe Georgia's in. I believe Texas is in. When you look at conference championship weekend as a whole now, what Texas did to Texas A&M last night was basically just let A&M back in the game. Texas is the better team. When you look big picture at the conference championships, there's only going to be, I think SEC is going to get two teams. I think Penn State and Oregon are automatically in. There's only a one bid stealer situation, and that's ACC. And I think the Big 12 is getting one team in.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, I don't know. I mean, of all the reveals of this committee, this is by far the most important. Last week was a baseline, but where do they put Clemson, Miami, Alabama, South Carolina? I mean,
Yeah.
I was on a part of an interview yesterday with Shane Beamer. This was before the game, and we know what he said after the game. By the way, Texas finally got a big win yesterday, not against A&M, but that Michigan game now really counts
Yeah.
as a quality
Yep.
win. So I mean, it's so chaotic. I was on a conversation before this one where the Alabama the Alabama debate started with some schools, the Miami, and Miami has good wins, but Alabama doesn't. I mean, Alabama beat Georgia. But they also lost to Vanderbilt, a six-loss team, and to Oklahoma, a six-loss team. I mean, you know what, Matt? They're all flawed.
Yeah, what would you do with Alabama at this point? Because to me, there's going to be the argument, and you just hit on it. Because it's funny how 10-2, Ohio State's in. Okay, but why? I'm not saying they shouldn't be, but then you can't use the same logic for them and be like, oh, Miami 10-2, they're out. Alabama 9-3, there is so many decisions. I could argue South Carolina and Ole Miss sitting here with you right now.
Yeah, I really don't. I was vacillating as I watched Clemson. That South Carolina belongs in, but then you start thinking about South Carolina's loss. To Alabama, fluke or not, they still lost. And then what gets me about South Carolina is that just beat down that Ole Miss put on them. And I know it was weeks and weeks ago, but it's hard to square. And yeah, and Matt, I don't have a good answer for you today. I'm gravitating a little bit back toward Alabama because I know they're capable of beating good teams, and
Sure.
I would rather put in a flawed team that can beat a good team like Georgia than just put somebody in because they have a win over the number 23 team in the country.
So here's what we know. We know Iowa State and Arizona State are playing for the Big 12 championship. Go Devils. If you're a friend of the program here, the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate, you know that story to me is near and dear because it's my alma mater. Stunning. So Arizona State, Iowa State, Big 12 championship. Right now, coming into the penultimate ranking, South Carolina's 15th, they win. Ole Miss 14th, they win. Alabama 13th, they win. Clemson 12th, they lose. Boise State, UNLV, winner of that's making the college football playoff. Say that thing 5 times. Indiana beat down at Purdue, no surprise. SMU sitting ninth. They get the win against Cal. Tennessee against Vandy. Georgia against Georgia Tech. Miami loses. They're going to drop down. Notre Dame may be the scariest team of anyone we're not talking about. Has anyone looked more dominant since the loss to NIU? Penn State, they get the win. Texas, they get the win. Ohio State loses, and Oregon, the only unbeaten team. And Paul, here's why we did this, right? 12-team playoff. The committee can literally sit there. And I said this last night in college football final about 4 hours ago when I went to bed. The committee should, Paul, sit there and be like, I don't give a damn. Like, you're playing better football than anyone right now.
Right.
You're in. You're out. Why not do it? Isn't that why we did this?
Yeah, I think you answered the ultimate question, and yeah, that's the best way to put a bow on this. It really doesn't matter what you did Labor Day weekend. It helps. It puts you in position, which all these schools have done. But if you're looking at it in terms of how do you get a great tournament, which is what we're looking at here, how are you playing? Are you South Carolina is one of the most consistent teams in the country right now. Is that enough to get you over the fact that they got destroyed at home by one of the other teams who was trying to get in? And Matt, I don't have a lot of faith because committees tend to look at data points and the easy things that they can sing kumbaya about. And the way they can sing kumbaya is by saying, well, look at Miami. They have wins over 3 of the top 25, even though they're the ones making up the top 25. I think Alabama has 4. Missouri is one of Alabama's wins. South Carolina is one of Alabama's wins. Georgia is. So do you weigh the wins versus the losses? Do you look at when it is? And I think you just have to find. And what they will do, I'm convinced, they'll find some common ground because guess what? They're a committee.
2 things left. I know you got to do Sports Center. I got to hop to the airport. I'll get you out of here. 1, SEC, 6 teams in the top 15. There's 6 of them now. And that's Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina. Paul, of those 6, how many do you believe the league is getting in?
I'm still going with 3 right now.
Okay.
I think in the end, it's just like Clemson to win. You know that.
It's got that. It's tailor-made for Dabo.
And if it's a close game, I think SMU will probably sneak in. I'll defer the Big 12 to you, And I think the problem with Alabama, Ole Miss, and South Carolina, there's not a convincing argument. And thinking like a committee member that they'll go, well, if we put Alabama in, then we get this debate. Let's just leave all three out.
Yeah, right. At that point, just make it clean because we're not going to hear the end of it. We were just about a 14 playoff, and only college football America would start complaining when you add 8 more teams, and there's going to be an argument. Finally, we're seeing this become a trend. I do want to get your opinion on this one. Florida State finishes the season 2-10. That is the second worst game drop off from the prior year in the AP poll era, which I believe is 1936 ish. It is that bad. The big story coming into yesterday, Gus Malzahn resigns at UCF to announce that he's going to become the offensive coordinator at Florida State. Your thoughts on that one?
Here's a guy who played for a national championship 11 years ago as the head coach against who? Florida State. He was the Auburn head coach. He was the offensive coordinator when they won the title with Cam Newton. I think he looked at it and said, you know what, we went 4-8. I'm going to get fired next year. I've got years left of my career without the pressure. He's made a lot of money. Remember, he got about a $19 million payoff from Auburn. And why deal with it? And, maybe in the back of his mind, is he thinking, I go there and do a good job and they fire Norvell and move me up? I mean, I don't know. I don't think so. I think Gus Malzahn is the head coach, but it's just he took a look at what Chip Kelly did and said, that guy's got a better lifestyle right now. He's got all the money he needs. I'm going to do the same thing.
Oops, and then Ohio State loses. Maybe being the offensive coordinator of a team that they're going to ID and be like, hey, you're going to take over for the head coach when we fire him is not the best idea. But I said this yesterday. Sometimes we'll give ourselves credit for something we say early in the day. I would like to read you this, Paul, in closing as we get ready to head to championship weekend and go to various parts of our country. My tweet on the Twitter before the day started, I said, happy college football regular season finale Saturday. Here are my bullet points. 1, the overtime rules are awful. That was from Georgia Tech because it's true. 2, see above. 3, there will be chaos. 4, something unexpected will happen today, the Malzahn thing, leading to something unexpected happening tomorrow, which is now today. I did this at 7:38 a.m. I still believe by the time we get to next week, something unexpected will happen in the world in college football that we don't see coming.
Nick Saban's returning. Anyway, you're right, Matt. I am breathless here. It's early Sunday morning. Don't even know how to characterize what we've seen because there's still more to come. I mean, I know that sounds like I'm reading a local TV upcoming promo, but it has just been that crazy.
Let me local TV this promo for you because when it happens, we are on your side. You are speechless. I am sleepless. It's how we do it here on the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate. What a regular season it's been. And remember, championship weekend, we've got you covered. For Paul Finebaum, I'm Matt Barrie. Thanks for watching the Matt Barrie Show presented by Allstate here on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel.